Namaste. My name is Verdeluz, and I am in Asheville, North Carolina. Yesterday, I was in Costa Rica. Uh, so, welcome to Divine Timing Coaching. I want to share with you a little bit about the astrology of COVID-19, the coronavirus, as well as some meditation that we can do during this time of crisis and opportunity of a great unification that's taking place. Um, this is a really, really strong experience for all of us, and just making sure that the audio is working here. Yeah, it looks like it is. Um, yeah, so it's quite a trip. I'm looking outside and seeing all the beautiful flowers and the trees starting to bloom. The birds are really going off here, and I almost stayed in Costa Rica, and yeah, this is really strong. So I'd like to share with you a few of the insights from astrology about what's going on. We have a much bigger talk next week, next Wednesday, next Tuesday, in fact, for the new moon, and that's going to be a webinar all about the astrology of this virus, but also about Saturn moving into Aquarius, which I'll mention a little bit here today. Um, that is going to be marking the beginning of a new age for our planet, which comes in at the end of the year with Jupiter and Saturn conjunct in Aquarius. So there's so much happening. We're really at a peak moment right now. Hi, Diane. Welcome. And welcome to anyone that's joining. Thank you for being here today. And thank you for um, the courage you're bringing to what's going on the planet right now. Hi, Heather. This is an initiatory cycle. We are being guided into really potentially a point of no return on this planet. Hi, Asa. And and so let's just talk about what has set the stage here. And then let's talk about the right now, this next week. As you know, as everyone knows, that what happened one day to the next and in this last week was almost like unbelievably accelerated. And that will probably continue in the next week. I want to lay out the next couple of weeks and then also look ahead into the next couple of months and into the end of the year and just kind of give an umbrella. And then if you'd like to go deeper, we'll be able to get deeper on our call next Tuesday. So I also really want to invite you to come into your heart for this. Hi Heidi, um, for this talk today, because a lot of what's happening can we can get into our heads, we can get into anxiety, we can get into worry and fear, right? And that's a particular vibration. And our healthiest states are when we're in the open heart, when we're surrendered, when we're in love, when we know who we truly are, when we know that we're eternal, that we're all being held in the embrace of the divine, which is our true nature. And I think that overall, that's what this big test is for all of us, is to recognize who we really are and put us right into the face of mortality in some way, and also into what's truly important to us. And it's a complete reevaluation of everything. And the earth is crying out right now. And this is there's some kind of larger intelligence, larger divine order at play. When we're in the midst of it, it's very hard to see it, right? Just like anything in our lives, when we're going through the dark night of the soul, the big struggle, the suffering, it's very hard to get perspective. And this is really, really important. In fact, I study a lot of Stoic philosophy these days, which I feel like is probably one of the most important for us to study during this crisis that we're in. It's very pragmatic, and one of the focuses is to look at what are called externals, right? What can we control and what can we not? And that's one of the things with this situation is there's a lot out of our control, And then there are some things in our control. Our attitude is in our control. The way we treat each other, our families, the way we talk about things online, what kind of information we take in and how much we do take in, that's in our control. Of course, the physical thing of like physical distancing um, is in our control. And I heard a commentator say that, we shouldn't be socially distant, we should be physically distant, which is a really interesting distinction and important because um, social connection actually needs to increase right now as physical connection may be decreasing. It's really essential, and it's going to be really essential in the coming months that we are innovating and staying creative and staying inspired and empowered through how we're socially bonded with each other, even if we are more physically distant. Um, there's so many metaphors going on here, right? And one of the things that has really struck me is is that as we move towards this complete new phase of evolution on the planet, which is Jupiter and Saturn moving into Aquarius in December, astrologers have been talking about this for a long time. Jupiter and Saturn meet every 20 years. That's not a big deal. But what is a big deal is that this marks a movement into the air signs. It's been in earth signs for the last 200 years. And we've been focused and obsessed with, earthly gains, material gains, mastering the earth plane in some sense of kind of resources and hoarding and all of that. And what happens is that now, over the next 200 years, whenever Jupiter and Saturn meet, the zeitgeist of the planet, the whole motif and theme of the planet moves into this air element, and it starts with Aquarius. We're moving into a time that in a way it's completely unprecedented. And we know that Aquarius is the most revolutionary, evolutionary, and experimental and an innovative sign. And so one of the things that we have to embrace right now is that we're in almost like the balsamic phase before the Jupiter Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. We're in the kind of the old world is completely dying, and this is part of the symbolism of that. And something is birthing, and it is so different and deeper and vaster that it's very hard for any of us to grasp. I liken it to the singularity. Maybe some of you have heard of that from, it's a word used a lot in robotics and in AI, that once AI becomes very self-aware and emotionally aware, then we've hit a point of no return and we won't be able to tell the difference between humans and AI. And most people have thought that that's a lot of what this singularity that's coming, especially this decade, is going to be about. And it may be that, but there's another, we know that technology is going to increase and rapidly so. And if this virus, stays with us for a long time, which it may, what kinds of technologies will be born out of this? There could be a lot of rapid acceleration into virtual living and virtual worlds. So that's a big conversation, and we'll talk more about that on Tuesday. But what I'm thinking about and have been pondering is, Aquarius as a symbol of also the Galactic Federation or other civilizations, alien civilizations. And I've always thought, of course, that is the singularity when humanity meets the other, and then all at once we are humanity, and that is this other intelligent life form. Well, what about the virus, right? We are talking about being at war with the virus, but the virus is part of the biosphere. It's part of the intelligence of Gaia. And what has happened here is a very concentrated version of a very spiritual metaphor, which is we are all in this together. We are all one at this time. There's really very little or any countries in the world, peoples of the world who don't know about this or aren't experiencing this. And because travel is being restricted and going to be restricted more, and because sporting events and entertainment has has decreased or is not happening. What happens is that people are tuning into the same news and the same information kind of collectively. And if you remember things like when Princess Di, Diana died, or maybe, of course, 9/11, these moments where kind of all of our consciousness, JFK, if you were alive then, all of our consciousness went towards this one event or one thing. There's something extremely unifying and a revelation of that unity consciousness. Ironically, it's as we are more separated physically. And this is really the story of the soul. This is the story of the idea of separation, which has created corporate capitalism on the planet, which is about competition and about more production and about who has and who hasn't, and the kind of dualities and polarities which make us think that we're separate, and they're fed by that notion of separation. And yet that is the very thing that the ego creates to create this whole world, when in reality we are one consciousness, and awareness is primary. And in this process, we have to remember that whatever is happening, awareness is holding all of it. In Tantra yoga, we call this Shiva, right? And right now, Shakti, the goddess, is dancing and undulating in all kinds of mad and crazy ways. And we have to hold that in our awareness in a state of equanimity. And this is one of our biggest tests right now, is to not create unnecessary judgments or opinions. And as the Stoics talk about, it's not what happens in our life that causes the suffering. It's the judgments about what happens, right? And we all know this, right? It's really how we speak about the events and the experiences and the relationships. And yes, this is extremely difficult for us, but we are in something very new and unprecedented, and we're going to be in this for a long time. And we need to really look at right now how we're going to perceive and relate to a new world and our place in this new world. And so I think of this virus as like a singularity, as like an invitation and almost a commandment from the planet, to slow us down, to go within, to connect with our souls, to learn the power of solidarity and compassion. And if you've looked online, you've seen that maybe that all of the waters now around Venice have started to clear. And Venice, you may know, has some of the worst water in the world, or like polluted water. And now the dolphins and the fish are even swimming in the water there. There's pictures on Twitter, and I mean, this is a short time frame, right? Here, where the virus is so bad and people are dying, nature is coming back to life. The same thing in Wuhan, where this began in China. Blue skies, springtime birds, and this is one of the most polluted cities in China, so in the world. I mean, there's something very very poetic about this. And it really takes us getting out of our anthropocentric viewpoint of the human centric viewpoint, and realizing that there is a bigger intelligence going on here. No matter what happens, we're going to have to look at in the future, that when humans stop doing what humans have been doing, the earth can live again. And so there's a lot about that. It gets very emotional. It gets very intense. And we're relating to each other now, as Brian said, that we're all united in our fear of death, in our fear of the collective death, or our family's death, or our own death. And that's why we have to come into an embrace with our own mortality. And I'm actually taking another course. I've studied death a lot. I've done a lot of shamanic work and lead ceremonies, and a really big death and rebirth experience. And one of the most powerful things for us to do right now is to really look at that relationship to mortality and to our eternal nature. And what is eternal is not that egoic self that really wanted to, make $1 million or like have a certain lifestyle or all of those things, like, we really have to reevaluate what's important to us now, and go within ourselves. And that's why a practice like journaling is really, really important. Um, and also as a psychological tool. Journaling has been studied. It's also an ancient Stoic practice of reviewing your day at the end of the day and seeing how did I live virtuously or not during my day. How could I do it better? And that's really what matters to the Stoics. What matters is character. It's really not about accomplishment. It's not about money. It's not about fame or all those things. And that's again what's happening right now is no matter what your status is in the world, it doesn't matter, right? This is the leveling field that we're on now, and there's something quite beautiful in how that is bringing us into this collective awareness. I'll share with you about some of the astrology next, and I want to just bring in. I'm going to invite you to just touch on your heart, and I'd like to bring in the goddess Tara. Tara is the Tibetan Buddhist goddess of compassion. There are many versions of Tara: the white Tara, the green Tara, the red Tara, and I'm going to call on the white Tara and invite you to stay in your own sense of purification and cleansing and coming home to your true self and that empty state that the white represents. And coming into the purification of Tara and into our heart center, we ask you, Divine Mother, Goddess of Compassion, to be with this planet, with all of her beings at this time. And I invite you to come into your breath and breathe in this Goddess of Compassion that lives in the core of every cell, that is dancing in the atoms in you and is inviting you to send out this compassion to all beings, to emanate it to all beings, and also to feel it from this goddess. She was born of the tear of Avalokiteshvara, the 1,000-armed deity of compassion, because he took such pity on humanity's suffering. And out of his tear was born the goddess Tara, so that in moments of crisis, when we need to call out for the Divine Mother, her other name is Kuan Yin, we call on Tara to bring that loving, maternal compassion to this planet, into our hearts, into our families. Om Tara Tutare Ture Swaha. Om Tara Tutare Ture Swaha. Om Tara Tutare Ture Soham. Thank you, Goddess. Wow. It was a really difficult decision for me to choose to come back to the States. I have been trying to sort of move away from the States for a long time, and was in a very idyllic place in Costa Rica. But something in my heart called me back, and we need to stay in our hearts during this time, no matter what they're telling us, and surrender and work with Tara and Raphael, Angel of Healing, or whatever guides are calling us. This is a time to really connect with them. This week, we have a lot of really intense energy with Mars in the sky, and it's going to really amplify and accelerate a lot of what's going on, if that seems possible. Let's just talk for a moment about the eclipses that happen in January, and to recap that we are in a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Saturn is moving a little bit away from Pluto, but we have been in this and was very strongly in this when the first case was announced. The eclipse that happened, the solar eclipse in January, was with Ceres. Ceres is the Earth Mother. Her other name is Demeter, and she represents all of the life force on the earth, all of the plants, all of the agricultural life, the food. And so we've seen that this mad rush, especially in the US, around gathering resources and trying to get more food and rice and all of the grains that the grain goddess represents. Really, really powerful symbolism here. But it's also an invitation for us from Ceres to grow a garden now and to start communicating with your neighbors as much as you can. But that this is all about local people taking taking responsibility for the land that they're on and growing their own food and sharing their food. We're going to see more and more as Saturn Pluto has shown us again and again throughout history that governments and economies fail. They deconstruct, they destruct during the Saturn Pluto cycle. Saturn Pluto is probably the most intense in terms of volatility, in terms of a sense of darkness. The symbol of quarantine is very strongly symbolized by Saturn and Pluto. Saturn limits and constrains and constricts, and Pluto is like the cave, right? The darkness, the god of the underworld. And you could see walls around us with that, right? Uh, of course, we have to ask ourselves what can be created within the cave, right? And it's funny that we use the term man cave, for men going into whether it's their music studio or where they create from or whatever. But all of us now are being invited to a different kind of creative process. Maybe this is an opportunity for you, if you're not going out so much or distracting yourself, to go into the cave of your own consciousness, to meditate more, to deepen your spiritual practice, and also to create more, whether it's writing, whether it's through music, poetry, all of these different ways. The cave can be a fertile place for us. And that's part of the symbolism that's happening right now. But we have to really emphasize that Saturn Pluto energy is very ugly, it's very dark, and we are in the midst of it. It was strong during World War One. World War One began under the Saturn Pluto conjunction. World War Two ended under the Saturn Pluto energy in around 1947-48. One of the really powerful things is that 1982, which was the last Saturn Pluto conjunction, that was the end of a brief recession, and there's usually some kind of economic collapse when these two planets come together. This is doubled up because Jupiter is in Capricorn. And the first case of coronavirus occurred literally one day after Jupiter moved into Capricorn, or one day before. So Jupiter was just making that transition. And the last time Jupiter was in Capricorn was in 2008. And we all know that that was the economic meltdown and crisis that occurred. But Jupiter was also in Capricorn in 1984. And 1984 was coming out of a Saturn-Pluto relationship. Now, what also happened during 1983 and moving kind of emergent in 84 was that the HIV virus was discovered. And then Saturn Pluto really came into conjunction right around that time. So, what, if you can remember, I was only 4 years old, but if you were alive, then what kind of the sense of how that really touched the entire world. And there was a lot of fear, right? Now, of course, over decades, there's been a lot of movement with that, and healing and discoveries and, medicines and all of that. But the 80s was a very intense time around this. This suggests that what we're in right now is not something that's going to go away in a month or 2 months or in a year. This is a shift, a phasal shift, an evolutionary shift, and it's going to be with us for a while. there's some talks around 18 months till you can even know if any vaccine is really working properly. Um, there's a really different world that we start to live in. And we're not so aware yet of the ramifications, of the consequences of it. Um, and so that is the intensity that Saturn and Pluto brings. That it's at a level like during the Holocaust or during World War I, that where there is a sense of wartime and the sort of behemoth, massive vastness of that. Um, and again, the financial panic. It's really interesting that's what happened in 1914, and that actually. All these stock investors and brokers and all that at that time pulled all their money out and shut down the London Stock Exchange at that time for 5 months, the US Stock Exchange for 4 months. And this was basically every stock exchange closed. I mean, the same thing is really starting to happen now. And this is interesting too, because this is when the Federal Reserve began operations. And now the Federal Reserve has like lowered the interest rates in the states to like zero or something. I'm not following all of that exact. There's so much to follow, but this is part of this cycle, and it's repeating exactly things that happened in 1914. What does this bring up for us? What is real value? And Uranus is in Taurus. Uranus is reinventing and innovating across the sense of values and money. And remember that Taurus is an earth sign. So we're going to see more and more that what's really important is that we are embedded in the earth goddess. We are growing our own food. We are not dependent on systems. And this could definitely rock supply chains and things like that. And so the more self-sustainable we are and the more connected we are within our communities, the better. As we said, going to farms, building collectives, where that the sustenance is going to be there is the most important thing. This is not something to wait for. It's something to be doing right now. That's sort of the urgency of Uranus in Taurus. Community gardens, exactly. Somebody's asking, do you recommend pulling out all money now? Um, yeah, I mean, this is an interesting thing. It's like, where is the value going to be? I don't know. I don't know, Vicky. I have, of course, money in the bank and PayPal and all of these things, and I don't think it's going to be like tomorrow that like that's going to be worth nothing. But um, we're going to see just a huge fluctuation as we do every day now. It's like the stock is going up and down and Wall Street and all that stuff. And because nobody knows. And especially volatile is the next week because of Mars transits. Let me paint it for you. Mars is conjunct Jupiter today. Um, you know, and Jupiter is just a few degrees from Pluto. So Mars is coming to an exact conjunction with Pluto now. That's very intense energy. Mars, the god of war and aggression and activation, is meeting the god of death and the god of the underworld and the unconscious and the shadow. And it's getting amplified by Jupiter. Now, this could suggest that there's going to be more border closures. It could be more power struggles around what to do, around who's in control. Nobody's really in control. Who's taking control? Who's in leadership? All of that stuff can be coming up. We have to watch our own like personal outburst. Just fear, like just jumping out of us in every moment, and really become conscious of our unconscious, become conscious of our shadow. It's a really powerful time to do meditations and cathartic healing work, breath work in the next week. Could be really, really powerful for all of us. I will probably be guiding that process on Tuesday, at least a short one. But we need to move the energy physically during this Mars, Jupiter, Pluto. It's like that feels like a bomb inside of us going off. And so we want to be able to, dance it out, and and be careful of the kinds of like hooking into darkness or doom and all of that, and move that energy out. And if you have to listen to black metal, which sometimes I do, to do that, or you have to dance to psytrance and move really fast, whatever you need to move that energy out, breath work, or just deeper study of yourself and your soul. This is an important time to do that. But what we will see likely is a more intensification of the, the sort of darker vision out there in the next week with this Mars energy, and that it might just the case numbers might accelerate quite a bit, because that's what Mars does, right? Mars kind of forces the issue, and here he is with Jupiter and Pluto. There is after this transit, Mars will come into contact with Saturn. Saturn is just moved into Aquarius. And this is something we need to talk a lot about, and I'm going to be focusing on the call on Tuesday, and interpreting it in people's charts, because Saturn will be making this move in your charts. But, we see that, Aquarius is an air sign and rules things like a virus, things like science, things that touch humanity as a whole. And of course, where Saturn is, there can be constrictions, there can be more regulations and rules. So we have to look at what Saturn will be doing, moving into Aquarius, and that this next 3 months when he is there, we could see things like further travel restrictions. It wouldn't be surprising if a lot of borders close. If you see that, again, the populace, the collective is ruled by the sign of Aquarius. And so Saturn comes in, and now you have the force of authority or control say you can't go where you want to go, which is very much symbolic of Mars conjunct Saturn, because Mars is our desire nature, and when Mars hits Saturn, it hits a wall. It can't do what it wants to do. So there can be a sense that we are blocked, or we're challenged, or we hit a resistance, and that could be a very collective feeling at this time. But there is also a potential for us to rejuvenate and really get into a vision of what this means for us now as communities, and being collectively responsible. This is a big shift for us, right? Because we've mostly been living in like the I, the ego, the hedonism, the consumerism, and now we have to look at, whoa, we all have to take responsibility for each other. And this is part of this Mars Saturn in Aquarius. But yeah, into the exact transit of Mars on Saturn will be March 31st. So you're going to have that in effect through the first 10 days of April. But that might really be a strong curbing of individual rights and freedom, and can really sober us up in a lot of ways. But we realize that we're stronger together than we are alone. That's very Aquarian, right? And then there's the paradox again of here we are in isolation, but we're more together in that. And so there's something just extremely, paradoxical and poetic about this, but difficult. And when we look ahead, we can see that the sense is that these restrictions will be on us for a while. Venus will go retrograde in May in Gemini. Gemini is also an air sign. Venus, what we love to do, our aesthetics, our social life, retrograde, Gemini. Potentially, again, our social life becomes very technological, Gemini. Maybe we don't have as many freedoms. I would love if we do. I want to go travel and all of that, but um, we're gonna have to be with what is. But the information and the stories and the messages that we share during that Venus retrograde are going to be very important. And we are really writing a new story, each of us right now. And it is really important to journal this process. It's not only a historical time, but this is a time where each of our souls is really being examined and being mirrored. And we need to be compassionate in this process. Also, something that's happening is that the nodes are changing from Cancer and Capricorn to Gemini and Sagittarius. And I'm going to talk at length about this on Tuesday, but I really believe that this has brought up all of the themes of like emotional security, Cancer, versus all of the ambition and the external validation of Capricorn. But interestingly, now we all have to homeschool our children. And I'm sure there's many of you on the call who are doing that. And this has brought up all kinds of, again, challenge of like my duties out in the world, my duties to my family, how do I educate? And Gemini and Sagittarius, where the nodes are the two signs of the educators. You know, the storyteller, the messenger, the communicator, Gemini, and Sagittarius bringing wisdom and bringing truth. And so there's something completely new being born here, right? And online education happening in a big way, accelerating technology to make this happen. I am considering, and I'd love to get some feedback from people, something that I've done here and there over the years, but really setting up a training in the next month or more around using astrology and human design to help educate our children and our families at this time. So we'll talk about things like Mercury and learning style. We'll talk about the moon and how to support their emotional needs, their center of inner authority and their human design, how they make decisions, all of these core elements, and just give parents as many tools as possible to help with this process. This is a really significant transition, and so giving as many tools as possible, that's one of my goals. So if there's some interest in you in that, please let me know. I'm really considering offering that during this time. It might even be on a donation basis or some way to just bring as many people into it as possible, because I felt for years of my life that part of our utopia that we want to create is going to involve individualized archetypal education. And I think that might really come out as like a meme during this time. So this is, again, part of the silver lining of what's happening is that there's going to be all kinds of new creative innovations unfolding amidst what seems catastrophic or disastrous. But at the same time, if you look at the symbol of Pluto, and I'll end with this, Pluto is the volcano. I visit a volcano in Costa Rica. The volcano could remain dormant for a long time, right? And it's festering, and there's a magma, and it's this intense energy, right? And when it explodes, it will destroy everything in its path. And yet that destruction is also the seed of creation, right? The land masses, the lichen, all build off of what was just destroyed. And islands like Hawaii and places in Indonesia and Chile and Costa Rica, these places, these land masses are formed out of volcanoes, and we are now seeing the volcano explode. And in this process, we are all going to be part of the rebirth, and we have to look with new eyes. We have to stay in curiosity, stay with the child's heart, and allow this to happen, to surrender to what's happening, but also not passively, to really take active and intentional movement with our attitude, with our virtuous and ethical living with each other, with how we speak about what's happening, with being extremely social, even if we're physically distant, and really say, okay, what for me now? What is my new truth? And these are the questions I'd like to get some feedback on in the chat before we leave today, which is what has been your biggest challenge, whether it's a thought that you're having or an emotion, a story that's coming up for you around this, please put it in the chat. What has been the biggest challenge for you through this time? And what has been your biggest revelation about yourself, about your path, or your sacred work in the world, about what's important to you now, or just the world itself? Like, what has been the biggest revelation or epiphany for you? How have maybe your values changed? What has really come up for you during this process? And also know that it will continue to be coming up and bubbling up, especially in the next week. But please share here. We're in a community. There's some beautiful souls on this call right now. Tajali and Danya and um, Randy and Sarah, thanks for joining. Denise. So if you'd like to share it, we would love to hear just a little bit about your journey. You know, what's come up with your fears, thoughts, emotions, and any tools you've used to move through them, and also what this has made you realize about yourself, your soul, maybe a holding pattern in you, a resistance, right? And this is that Pluto energy, right? And the beautiful thing about Jupiter on Pluto is that there's a sense of a hope and an optimism and a faith that can really bubble up as we do the deeper work on ourselves, and as we look at what is fear really, you know. And maybe all fear comes back to the fear of death, you know. Maybe it all comes back to that. And if we can realize that death is actually the most creative moment of our life, that we're moving towards death at every moment, and that the Tibetans and the great sadhus from India and the shamans have always taught us how to prepare for death by dying before we die, and to realize that there really is no death. There's a shedding of the body. The consciousness is eternal. Awareness is omnipresent and will forever be. That maybe this is what this is about. And that's why I love studying Tantra so much. And we're going to do some Tantra yoga meditations next week on our call. Let me put the link in the chat here. So if people want to register for the call, we'll be doing Saturn and Aquarius in a deep dive. And that means we'll be doing personal interpretations. So to learn where Saturn is moving in your chart and how you can master a new area of life in the coming years. And then we'll talk about the general theme of Saturn in Aquarius. And definitely it's going to be a lot about what we're experiencing now, but a lot more as well. Here's the link to the class. And yeah, we have some really, I know things need to change, but my sadness overall, my finances being stopped in one day brought me to fear. I'm working through it. This has helped. Thank you, Rindy. Thank you so much. Yeah. And again, what are our values? You know, when we can't go out and make money in the same way, you know, does that mean we need to make money in a different way? Or what is money actually? It brings us right to the sense of what we've taken for granted. And that's what creates a new world. You know, when we look at all the things that have been unconscious, Pluto, and then we now bring them up to the surface, and we have to make decisions, right? We have to choose a new reality, a new paradigm to live in. Lisa says, the last 10 years have been a long death cycle of my own personal 3D world collapsing. To go through it and now be a leader towards the new. Yep. I mean, and this is sort of what we've all been leading up to, you know, for the last 5-10 years. You know, we've known that the world can't go on the same way, and our own personal worlds as a microcosm of that. So this is accelerating that now. And I think many of us have walked through, whether it's malls or the airport or wherever it might be, and asked the question of, like, really, can this go on like this? And now the veil has been lifted, you know, and now we have to make choices and align ourselves with what really feels true and purposeful and as an extension of the earth and her journey. Teresa says, what is important is that the earth is having a break and taking a deep breath to see how much damage we've done to all life. I am excited for the new earth we are birthing, to grow our own food, be connected to nature. Absolutely. Thank you, Teresa. Um, biggest challenge has been the uncertainty of it all. Biggest revelation, um, the importance of community. Absolutely. Thanks, Aurora. And this uncertainty is something that I hope you all will tune into in terms of the upcoming summit that we're going to be leading. It's actually going to be called Emergence and Empowerment in an Age of Uncertainty. We're going to bring all these visionaries, entrepreneurs, coaches, healers, different speakers together, 25 of them. Jocelyn Mercado, my business partner, and I from Sacred Planet, we are doing this incredible webcast coming in the first week of April. And it just seems like, I mean, we planned this for 6 months, and here we are, not knowing we'd be in this world right now. And so we are really excited to share this with you at this time, and it feels like it's really appropriate. And we're going to talk about what's on the other side of this, because we are making a world that we've known forever is possible, but we've really needed a big kick in the ass, and this is it. And so, the utopia that we want to create is going to take a lot of hard work, and it's going to take the end of one world and the beginning of another. So, if you'd like more of that, send me an email. If I don't have your email, if you know that you don't get emails from me, and we'll send you that. We're going to start sending some information out about that really, really soon, either next week or the following week. It's a live, free online conference, so we'd love for you to join us in that. I'll see a couple more comments here, and then I'm going to go for today. And thank you all for being on the call, and I hope to see you on Tuesday again. If you'd like personal interpretations and a much deeper dive, I'm going to talk about the U.S. chart, how this is affecting the U.S. Really big, as you can imagine, and just go deeper into the cycles that are unfolding. Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, Pluto, Mars's journey, Mars retrograde this year, which is very big. So yeah, appreciation to everyone here. Maintain light, love, respect for the earth. Thank you. Blessings for your health. Beautiful. So much love to you all, and stay in your heart. Stay with the goddess, whoever those deities or angels or guides are that you work with. Keep them close to your heart on the daily practice, and stay centered and grounded, and send you a big embrace. Much love. Namaste.